So yesterday I found my mother's cousin. His name is Olga Horak. She goes all around talking about her experience in concentration camps and so forth. And then recently she talks about her grandson being attacked and bullied for being a Jew in private school in Sydney, Australia, or anyway in Australia. I really don't get these people that she could have come to Israel after the war. She had family here. She says she doesn't have family, but she's my mother's cousin. My grandmother is her only living relative and their children. I don't get these people that talk about anti-Semitism and how much they suffer, and yet they have a country here, a Jewish state, and they don't come here. They don't raise their kids here, and then they complain about anti-Semitism. It doesn't make sense to me. Plus, Australia is really expensive too. So I don't think I'm going to reach out because she hasn't reached out for me. She says she doesn't have family, and she does have family. She knew of my existence. I got a koala bear when I was like 8 years old. She came to Israel. I never met her. And then she talks about forgiveness and blah, 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 blah. I don't have any family. She had family. She knew about it. She met my grandmother. She's my mother's cousin. My mother passed away in 2009. I never received a condolence letter or anything. It's easier to love strangers. It's easy to love a people than to love people. You know? There's a saying by Snoopy, I love mankind, it's people I can't stand. So all those people that talk about the Holocaust and whatever, the real Holocaust is that you're born into a family and then you just cut off ties and you're not interested in their children, you're not interested in anyone, you're more interested in strangers than you are in your own children. You talk about how the Holocaust must never happen again, but do you ever think about visiting Israel, supporting Israel? Instead of supporting a Holocaust museum and looking at those horrible artifacts of how they made blankets from human hair, come to Israel and support a youth program, support coexistence between Arabs and Jews, support the state of Israel, because this is our future. The Holocaust was a horrible, horrible event that we must never forget, but the Jews have a homeland now. And we have to protect this homeland, make sure that there'll always be a safe haven for Jews, that if you do encounter anti-Semitism, I'm hoping the grandson of Olga Horak would consider coming to Israel. Because with all the disadvantages and all the criticism of Israel, it's still the Jewish safe haven. And it's still a reason why my grandmother was the only one in a family of 7 siblings who survived with her children. Because she came to the land of Israel. It wasn't a state then. And she came to the land of Israel in 1941. And that's the only reason why she's the only one who survived. Otherwise, she would have written a memoir about her life in concentration camps. Who knows if I would have been born at all. So my grandmother and my grandfather and their 2 daughters came to Israel, land of Israel. It was the British mandate. My grandmother had a Palestinian passport, because it was called Palestine. Not because there's Palestinian people here, but because that was the Roman term for the land of Israel. And that's what the British called Israel. And they didn't let Jews in. They didn't let a lot of Jews in. They could have been saved. But my great-grandmother, as soon as Hitler came into office, came into power, 1933, my great-grandmother, on my maternal side, grandfather's mother just said, I'm going, I'm leaving. She took her daughter and she left my grandfather to run the lumber business. He was there from 1933 to 1941. My mom lived 2 years under a Nazi regime. Olga talks about it, how you're not allowed to do things. You had to wear a Star of David. My mother just said that she couldn't sit on benches, things that you can't even imagine. And you know, my mother had criticism of Israel, but she always found it still to be her home with all the criticism, and she felt safe here, despite having lived through all the wars that Israel had and attacks by Iran, Iraq, whatever, I don't know. Iran too? I don't know. Maybe no, Iraq. Anyway, with all the terror attacks and all the wars, it still felt safer than to be in a place that all of a sudden people tell you it's not your home anymore, it's not your business anymore, you're not allowed to go to school anymore just because you're Jewish. And even though I think my family has lived in Slovakia for generations and generations. She got back her passport. They wouldn't give me the citizenship for some reason. I could get a Hungarian passport, I was told. But you know what? I'm thinking about it. What's the point of going to live abroad and not being able to identify as an Israeli or a Jew because you're going to get nasty comments? I mean, people don't really like us. I don't know why, but that's the facts. One of the facts of life. Anti-Semitism is one of the worst forms of racism and one of the oldest, if not the oldest. And I don't really want to understand it anymore. I just want to avoid it. And to those of you who want to avoid anti-Semitism, I don't think where you're living is more expensive than Israel. Yeah, Israel is expensive, but unless you live in like a really poor country like India or Thailand, I don't know, Asia somewhere, which you probably don't. Anywhere in the free world in the West is really pretty expensive. Because if it's not housing that's expensive, it's medical services, which Israel has like a really good system, public health system. And we have great weather. Look, this is November 21st and we're out here. I have a cold, so I didn't go swimming, but she went swimming. She goes swimming every day. She's a native of the Middle East, rescued from a Bedouin village, and I'm very proud of her. And yes, identity is complicated for Jews because our ancestors come from different countries because we were dispersed among the nations after our land was taken over. But let's face it, thanks to Zionism, I'm alive. Because if my grandmother was like her siblings and would have stayed and trusted that this was her country, that Slovakia was her country and nothing bad will happen to her, I don't know if we would have written a memoir, but I want to write a memoir one day, but it's going to be about other topics than anti-Semitism for sure, because I haven't experienced it that much except living in Europe, and I try to forget that time. And my children definitely experienced it, and they still live there, and they choose to live there. But if you live somewhere where you called anti-Semitic slurs, then think about it. Think about whether you want to continue like that. I'm not saying Israel is perfect. We have our problems. We have the Middle East conflict and whatever. But the way I see it, you're either with us or against us. And if you're going to support a Holocaust museum, I don't see the point. Talking about how you were a victim, I prefer talking about how you were able to rebuild your identity and to return to your homeland, your historical homeland, and rebuild here. Whether you're religious or not, doesn't matter. You still come back to your historical homeland, which was built by our ancient kings, and of which there's so much evidence. So to all those who support Palestine or whatever, we have enough totalitarian Arab countries. Now there's the games from Qatar, and it's always shocking for me, the reactions of people there. They're so anti-Israel, and so many people said for no money, even millions of dollars, they weren't willing to participate in the Mondial, singing or doing anything for it. Shakira, for instance, and a lot of singers just didn't want to have anything to do with Qatar, and for good reason. Every country in the Middle East except Israel doesn't allow LGBT rights. Hey, dog rights. Look at this one. And animal rights, LGBT, women rights are just completely 180 degrees. I'm not saying we're perfect, but completely different. And it's the only country where Arabs and Jews live and work side by side. Israeli Arabs can vote and have citizenship, even though they don't do their army service. They're exempt. I think they should do national service, but that's my opinion, and my opinion only. The weather here is lovely. People here are quite open-minded for the most part, and we do have shared values. I mean, we do have our abuses and our human rights abuses, but most people agree that you shouldn't harm animals. Most people agree you shouldn't harm LGBTQ. Most people don't believe that you should harass women. So we have shared values. The majority, there's only a minority that doesn't think that. And we'll see how Israel proceeds, but the core of our nation is that we are here for a reason, and we're not going away. And this is the Holocaust Museum. It's a living Holocaust museum, because here Jews can live as liberal. They don't have to go to extreme sects. They can be liberal. They can be whatever they want. They can be free to believe in whatever they want here. And despite the security issues, it's nothing like most American inner city violence, and at least nobody's going to call me anti-Semitic slurs. And we do have the Arab-Israeli conflict, and hopefully one day it will just slowly disappear, because people will realize it's better to find peace for everybody's sake, especially for the Arabs, because they're not getting anywhere with it. It's not like they're making progress by continuing this military conflict. And it's not like they don't have most of the Middle East, like 99.9% of the Middle East is theirs. So for all of you who support the fact that we should get out of here, we don't have another country, we really don't. Where am I going to go back to? Ukraine on my father's side, to Slovakia on my mother's side? In a way, it's kind of interesting, because all the countries that Jews had to leave are in such bad states. Even the US is not doing that well, I would say. So it's a blessing that we have this place. Peace, light, and love.